at its heart.
Welcome to the Everyday Saint podcast. Today we are here with Sister Veritas, who is part of the congregation of the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy, and she is here to share her vocation story, which I'm so excited for because you've been able to speak a little bit already, and you just have such a light about you, so I'm really excited to talk with you today. So welcome, Sister.
Thank you so much. It's really a blessing to be here. So I'm
Yes.
excited for the conversation and see where the Lord takes it. So
Great. Well, just to begin, before we even get to really your vocation story, let's kind of go from the very beginning. Would you be able to share a little bit about how you came to know Jesus in the first place?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. That's a good place to start. So I grew up in Wyoming originally. And so an interesting fact about Wyoming, which people will probably guess, but there's not a lot of people there to begin with. So also not a lot of churches. So I grew up knowing about Jesus, but not really having that relationship with him when I was first born. My mom was raised Catholic. She had fallen away from the faith. And then my dad was raised Mormon, but he had fallen away from his faith as well. So I had a Catholic mother, Mormon father, and both weren't really practicing. And then in God's design, around the time my parents were getting married, my mom's dad was passing away. And so one of his last desires was that she be married in the Catholic Church, which was such a huge blessing looking back on it now. So my mom really pursued that. And so my parents got married in the Catholic Church, and it really got my mom questioning like her faith, like why was this so important to her dad? And so then I was born, and we didn't have a Catholic church in our town, but we had a little American Legion hall. And so on Friday nights, we had a dispensation from the bishop. A priest would drive from several hours away to celebrate Mass for us. Wow. So my earliest memories of going to church as a kid was in this hall, and we would unfold the card tables, get out the folding chairs, and that folding table was our altar, and confessions were heard in the janitor's closet, which is kind of fitting if you think about it. Like that's where our souls are cleaned. And so I remember just being very moved by that. And around the time I was 8 or 9, I think, we finally had a church built in our town. So we had enough Catholics in our town that had moved in from other states. And so my mom and I started going to church regularly. And around that time, my mom had a reversion back to the faith, and she was just on fire. Like she found the joy of confession. And so that was really my earliest memories of, just seeing the faith lived out in a communal way, and then seeing its impact on my mom's life. And my mom got very sick when I was about 11. And I'm also an only child, so I didn't really have a lot of support to lean on. Like, of course, like I had my father, but really just asking Jesus, like, why? Because her sickness came around the time of her reversion as well. And so just really starting to lean on Jesus and ask him and praying. Like I remember as a little girl just like praying, for my mom's healing. And so that's where I really started to initially get to know Jesus and learn how to pray from the heart. So yeah, those are like the beginnings of faith in my life. But
yes, so beautiful too, because I think God works so much in our sufferings, and we want to avoid it at all costs, right? Like we hate suffering, and naturally so, right? But yet in this suffering is as we know that that's where we're closest to Jesus, is in the suffering. And even as an 11-year-old, to like see this suffering happening and knowing that there's something else that I can turn to for help. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about where did you went from there, of like this is where the faith kind of started becoming your own in this prayer. But did it kind of stay in this supplementary prayer for a while? Did it turn more into a prayer of getting to know Jesus more? What was that like?
Yeah, it definitely turned into like that personal relationship with Jesus. I would say that I really like encountered Jesus as my friend and as like someone that I could always turn to, probably when I was 16 or 17. So growing up, like fast forwarding through my mom's illness, um, seeing her trust in the Lord and her surrender, and how she wasn't like getting angry at the Lord, because I think that's a lot of times like that first reaction. Um, so for me, like that always was in the back of my mind. Of course, it wasn't that conscious, but during like those times, but looking back, it's like, okay, yes, that was always in the back of my mind, of Jesus just saying like, I have your mom, I'm taking care of her. And then when I got into middle school, high school, my mom decided to homeschool me. So I went through a shift of being in a public school setting to then being homeschooled. And so what that allowed was there was a few other Catholic families in the area. So we were all homeschooling together, all of the kids. So I really started to get like a Catholic community, and really more of a Catholic education. So I was learning about the saints. I was learning about the sacraments, the church, things like that. And it was so intriguing to me that I really kind of like went head first into it. Like I just found it so fascinating, all the different stories that our faith has. And but around that time, as well as in middle school and getting into high school, it can get like kind of tricky with wanting to fit in and be cool, but also like be living a good, like virtuous Catholic life. So I really started to experience that pull of the two lives of, I was going to church on Sunday. I was helping with teaching CCD because we didn't have a lot of teachers. So I was helping out with that. But then, my friends and I, we started to get into some things that weren't always the best. And so it was really experiencing that pull, and that eventually brought me to a point where I was just absolutely exhausted, like trying to keep up the double life and keep up the Catholic image and remain with friends. So I remember one day in particular, I was driving back from my summer job that I had, and I must have been 16 at the time. And I remember driving by our church, and I decided just to stop in. Like I saw that it was unlocked. So I turned around and I went back into the church. And I remember like one of my friendships was falling apart. I was at the end of my rope in many different ways of just trying to keep like please everyone and, people pleaser here. But so I remember I just went into the back of the church, and I remember just laying down in the pew and just crying and just asking Jesus, like, what, like, there has to be something more than this trying to keep up this image and live a good life, but also like keeping friends and like just that whole pull, if I'm sure that we've all experienced it to some extent. But I remember at that moment, like just really, that was my first like real cry to the Lord of just like, you have to help me because I'm drowning in trying to, just keep my head above water here. And there was no like voice that came from the tabernacle or anything, but somehow like deep down, like I got a peace, and it was like I knew he was there and I knew he was listening to me. And so that for me it gave me the strength to then end certain friendships that I knew needed to be ended, and then also it led to then my decision to pursue Catholic education in college, because I was also looking at colleges around that time. So it was such a pivotal moment for me where like it was, there's that first cry to the Lord of, are you there? Like, do you see me? Do you feel what I'm going through? And him like assuring me that he was with me, even though it wasn't like clear word or a text message or anything, but it was just that assurance that he was there. So
yeah, I find that particularly amazing too, because I remember my high school experience too of starting to take my faith more seriously, and then once it's like you don't feel anything, kind of like you're saying, like there's no like voice or anything, like you can start to doubt. And
yes,
sometimes though we want to hide from that doubt, especially as our faith progresses, of like, we'll feel those little inklings of like doubting that trust in God or doubting where God is right now. And we want to avoid them because we don't want to think about those things. Like, I don't really want to doubt God because I know that's not good. So I shouldn't do that. But yet sometimes in those doubts is where we find our strength or our faith strengthened because of it. Like, we need to have those times where it's like we just need to call out to God and ask, like, are you there? Are you really listening? Because he'll respond. And then in that response, we know what to do. And I also love about your story so far is that you didn't have the clear voice that told you what to do. You just had a sense of God is with me, and so I'm going to be brave and do what I think and have discerned is best. And I think that's really important too, because sometimes God doesn't always tell us exactly what we should do, but he gives us what we need to do what we need to do.
Yes. Yeah. And to have that strength in the moment of like, okay. And even like looking back now, it's like so many times after that experience, I would go back to it. So like when I was, going through other things later on, then it was like always going back to the moment of like, no, like I know like Jesus showed me, like he's with me, So he's so
Beautiful.
good, he doesn't want us to be like floundering, trying to like, he wants to, and that's why like I'm so grateful. It was like, I did turn back that day, go into the church and just say like, okay, Lord, like I need something.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, helped one step in the right direction. So now at this point in the story, you're about like 16, 17 years old, you said. So you're still in high school. Where does your faith life take you after that?
So after that, I because I was homeschooled, I was able to start looking at colleges a little bit early, just based on like the way my curriculum was set up. And so when I was 17, just about 18, I ended up going to college, and I knew I wanted to go to a Catholic college, and so the most logical choice would have been Wyoming Catholic because it's like 4 or 5 hours from my house, and but at that point they were just kind of getting started, so I knew I wanted a more grounded college, and I really wanted to be in a good Catholic community. So I ended up, I loved the history of England in high school. And so I looked up, good Catholic colleges, and St. Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in New Hampshire popped up. And so, I mean, this is my high school way of thinking. I was just like, oh, great. It's a Catholic English martyr. So of course I'm going to apply there. I wasn't looking at but in any case, God worked with it. And so, so I applied, I was accepted to Thomas More College, and what I ended up doing, so around like 13, 14 in middle school, high school, I kind of had an inkling of religious vocation in the back of my mind. And so I used the opportunity of driving to college in New Hampshire to visit different convents along the way.
Really?
So we kind of did it, my mom and I, she drove me. We ended up doing like a little pilgrimage through the United States and toured different convents. And so that was kind of what was the beginning of my religious discernment of religious life. And so it was such a unique experience, but again, it was just seeing all the different ways that the faith was lived out through all the different expressions in religious life. Some were cloistered, some were active, some were Benedictine, Carmelite, so it was a beautiful tour of really like religious life in America that I got to see during that time going to college.
Right. So this was all during the time that you were even pursuing an education.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
So I was just starting college. So it was end of high school. Yeah. Going into college. So
was it tough to really devote yourself to your classes at the same time of considering religious life? Because I'm just picturing like, you're sitting there and it's like this like idea of being a religious sister is kind of like plaguing me, so I wouldn't be using my degree maybe.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely did shape my like studies in a way, because there were some elective classes that I ended up taking, like a little bit more theology, a little bit more church history than some of my classmates, because I kind of had a sense of what the Lord was inviting me to after graduation. But really, like, I knew, like, in college, it was just like, okay, like, this is my vocation right now, is my studies. So I'm going to do that. And I was still open to, okay, Lord, like, is it religious life? Is it marriage? And so in college, that's really where my discernment started to really, you know, take shape. And in many ways, I mean, it's, a lot of my friends were joking, like, oh, we're here for our MRS degrees.
Right. Oh, I know. I know that tune. Yeah.
So yeah, but during that time, it was really a grace to be in a Catholic setting, because it helped me to not only start living like really a good Catholic life and be taught, like, it's a liberal arts school. So we were constantly talking about the good life, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, like, what does the good life look like? What does it mean to pursue truth, beauty, goodness? We spent a semester in Rome. And so, I really got to go to the heart of the faith, and to see where all the saints lived that I had grown up reading about. And in Rome, I mean, there's so many different religious orders that you see walking around. So exposure to the habit. And so it was a beautiful way to kind of get really a full image of the beauty of the church. Mm-hmm. And then I had so many professors that had beautiful marriages. And so we, Thomas More College is a very small Catholic school. It's 95 students in the whole school. So it was a very good learning for community life, living in a community. But then we also really got to know our professors very well and their families. So it was a beautiful exposure to both, like, religious life, theology, deepening that strength of living a Catholic life, and then also seeing beautiful marriages that were being lived out. So, and one thing that really struck me was during our freshman orientation, I remember the president of the school, Dr. William Fahey, he took us to the campus is very small. It's 95 students, but he took us and he showed us. He said, I want you to know where the chapel is physically on the campus. And so you have, like, the library, dormitories, there's a barn or, like, our cafeteria. And then in the middle of all of this is the chapel. He said, this is the center of your studies. This is the center of your life. He said, make Christ the center of your life, and you'll never regret it. Something to that effect. And so I always remember, like, anytime I was walking to class, it was passing the chapel. They always made it so our class schedules allowed us to go to Mass. And what I also loved is during that time, not all of my classmates were Catholic. And so we had many incredible conversations during the classes that really brought different perspectives on the questions of faith, which was really enriching for myself, because it really taught me and, like, encouraged me to really, like, choose Christ again. It was just like, okay, like, where does faith and reason lead me to in my relationship with Christ, and having all the different experiences that they grew up with, completely different, family backgrounds, faith backgrounds. They were bringing that. So that was kind of the, I'm kind of like going full circle here, but it's really like that was where my heart was really shaped in leading up to where I am today. But
right. Well, and you were seeing all these examples of holiness, knowing there's not just one path for it. Like, all these other people are experiencing it in different ways, even with your professors and other students. Yeah. But clearly, you ended up choosing the religious life. So what were some of the things as you were discerning that was drawing you back to the idea of being a religious sister?
Really, what a lot of it at the beginning, and I always wish that someone had told me this when I was beginning discernment, because in my mind it was like, okay, what is this something that I'm feeling? because it's not like, we always joke in Catholic service, like, okay, Lord, like, just like give me a call or send me a text message, like, just tell me what you want me to do, like I'm trying to find it. And it was really, I ended up meeting one of my professors, actually. He was talking about how it was in our scripture class, and he was talking about like that still small voice that Elijah encountered when he was in the cave, and like going out before the Lord on the mountain. And he said, we need to step out and place ourselves before the Lord, but then quiet our hearts to like be able to listen to that voice. And so that started to really kind of change the way I was approaching discernment, because before I was like I shared, I was, I was visiting the convents. I was, I had been out on a couple dates, and, so I was trying to do all the things that I thought I needed to do, but I hadn't like actually just stopped and been with Jesus in the chapel and just been like, okay, Lord, like, let's have coffee, like, let's like, how have you made my heart to love you? And as soon as that, I encountered Jesus more in that way, instead of the me trying to pursue and me trying to do all the things. That's when everything started to, it was a slow process, but it started to come together. And so during my semester in Rome, I ended up, actually, we went for our fall break to Poland. And at that point, I knew I was like actively, like, open to religious life. At that point, I had just I had just ended a relationship, and I was like, okay, Lord, like, I'm going to be open for whichever direction you want me to go in. So that was right before I went to Rome. So I was in Rome with this intention of just like, okay, Lord, like, whatever you want,
better place to be, right?
And we went on our fall break to Poland, and so we went to the Divine Mercy Shrine in Krakow, which is where our sisters are, St. Faustina. And I remember being there, and I just, so many couples explain when they, when they meet their spouse, and they're like, I just know. And I was like, yeah, but like, you have to tell me how you know. Like, what does that mean? And when I was there, it was just like something clicked, and I couldn't explain it. And I was like, Lord, like, Poland? Like, really? Like, the language, like, forget it. Like, that alone, and it's all the way across the world. So I pushed it out of my mind. I was like, no, like, that it would be impossible for me to, to move to Poland and enter and learn the language and everything. So I came back to the United States, and I went on a come and see with Mother Angelica's order, actually, down in Alabama.
Yes.
Because I always thought cloistered, like, that was always in my mind. It was like, go big or go home sort of mentality. And while I was there, the sisters told me, like, okay, like, we think you have a vocation, but it's not here, and like, we don't think it's a cloistered vocation. And I remember being so crushed. Like, I was just like, what? Like, and so that was going into my junior year. And so I went back to school. I had my junior year of college, just really like with this weight on my heart. And so, I was just asking the Lord, like, okay, like, that's obviously not it. So I'm going to, go back to the drawing board, so to speak. And then the summer of my junior year, my best friend invited me on a discernment retreat. She approached me and she said, hey, I'm going on this discernment retreat with these sisters. Do you want to come? And she said, they're just in Boston, which was like 45 minutes from our college. And so I said, sure, like, why not? And so then I asked her, like, what sisters is it? And she said, oh, Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy. And I was like, so you mean we're going to Poland? And she's like, no, they have a house in Boston. And so that's when I learned that our sisters were in the United States. And immediately, like, all those memories from Poland and just that feeling that I had of just being at home with the sisters when we were there came back. And so as it was, I was already like too late to apply to go for the retreat. But my friend like called the sister and said, like, please, like, can you, like, is there room for one more? So I ended up going, and it was, as it has it, it was really funny because at the end of the retreat, she said, I'm definitely called to marriage. And I was like, I'm applying. So it was, yeah. So it was kind of one of those like Peter and Andrew moments, of like just being invited to come and see. And then like, yeah, the rest is history. So, but yeah.
Right. And it's amazing how God works in that. Like you weren't supposed to be there and somehow he still made a way for you to be there and to see that and to experience it. What was it, or like what continues to draw you to the religious life? I think sometimes, we can see married life in the day-to-day. We can see how family life works in the day-to-day. So what is it about religious life for you that draws you in?
Yeah. That was one of my biggest questions, and I think that's one of the reasons why I had that desire to go visit so many communities, was because I had no idea. Being from Wyoming, I had never seen a religious sister, and I mean, just here in the United States, it's not a vocation that we're exposed to. So it really is like a mystery. I think even one of the other day I noticed online there was a YouTube series or something like that, but it was called Behind the Veil, so it's just like there's just this mystery around religious life. But what it like really boils down to, and in my own journey of coming to understand the Lord's invitation in religious life, is like at its heart, religious life is that spousal relationship and spousal union with Jesus. Like if that's not the reason why you are considering religious life, if that's not the reason that you enter a religious order, if that's not the reason why you're coming to the Lord in this vocation, like it's going to be very difficult. And so that spousal relationship with Jesus. So as I was discerning and as I was going on the retreats and spending that time with Jesus, during those moments, it was really starting to see like the way he looked at my heart and the way that he loved me. It was so like, of course, we're all called to that personal and deep relationship with Jesus, whether we're married, whether we're single, whether we're in religious life, priesthood, but that deep moment of like knowing the way that the Lord looks at me, like as his bride and as his spouse, like that for me was just what completely changed the way that I wanted to respond to his love. And it was during our vocation discernment retreats and everything, one of the biggest questions that I brought on those retreats was, Lord, but I want to be a mother. Like, I want to be married. I want to experience that companionship, right? Like, because these are all good things. That's how the Lord made us, even just the way he made our bodies is to have that spousal relationship. And as I brought that to the Lord and I brought those desires, he started to show me the ways that he would fulfill those for me. And a lot of that is through like spiritual motherhood. And that, I mean, just when we go on missions, that's one of our apostles. We go on missions to spread the message of God's mercy, spread the message of God's love. Being with those people and bringing that message to them is such an expression of that spiritual motherhood. It's like, these are all my children. These are all my family. And so that relationship with the Lord is, of course, there's the two levels, like the human and the divine, the supernatural. So on a human level, the physical intimacy in marriage that we give up, the Lord like fulfills that in so many other ways if we allow him to. That's also the journey of just going deeper in a religious vocation is really bringing those desires and those different things to the Lord and asking him, like, Lord, like how do you wish to fulfill this? How do you wish to fulfill my heart? So yeah, that spiritual espousal with Christ is such a mystery, and it's such a beautiful, it's not, I know it's not something I'll ever be able to completely exhaust meditating on in this life. I mean, we have the lives of the saints, and where we get little glimpses into just the revelations that they've had of what religious life is like and what it's about. So that's just it's such a beautiful mystery and adventure with the Lord.
Yes. And too, I would think, it's more mysterious, especially when it's like as you're explaining, in comparison to marriage, like we see those certain desires fulfilled, especially the desire for motherhood. That's a very real thing that we experience. And I can imagine even going to mass and you see children, it's a very different perspective. But I think in any vocation, there's also those other desires that have to be put aside for the sake of what vocation you're in. Like when you're married, definitely. You're not going on dates anymore. You have this fidelity towards that one person. So there's parts of it too. It's like we're always going to be sacrificing. It's just what's going to be sacrificed.
Exactly.
Which I think there's probably a lot of freedom in that ideal too, that no vocation is better than another because they're all sacrificing and self-giving in a lot of ways. And you just talked about this motherhood, but I'm curious if there were any other worries that you had entering into the religious life, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, definitely. So actually, it's really funny you asked that, because one of my biggest ones, and I think for a lot of us when we're going through the discernment process, like, what if I make the wrong decision? Like, what if this isn't it? And what if, all the what ifs. And, what's incredibly beautiful is the Lord took all of my what ifs, and over the last 11 years of my vocation journey at this point, He's shown me so many, like, his fidelity through all of the what ifs. So one of the fears I had was, what if this isn't it? What if it's the wrong decision? And so I entered actually in the fall of 2015. So right after college, I graduated, I entered, and I completed my postulancy, novitiate, which are different stages in religious life. Those are usually what we call initial formation. And then I professed temporary vows. And during that time, I started to sense that the Lord was asking me to step out of religious life. And that was such a mystery for me, because I said, Lord, but this is it, right? Like, this is one of my what ifs. Like, did I make the wrong decision? Did I... and the Lord's so gentle. He's so gentle, and he was so patient with me. But he started to show me just all of the different ways that he wanted to heal my heart more. And, a lot of times when we think that when we enter into a vocation, at least this is my understanding, I was like, oh, all my past wounds and troubles will go away. I was like, no. We bring it with us into whatever vocation we're going into, whether it's into your marriage or into your religious life. And so the Lord showed me that he was asking me to step out of religious life, to come to know myself more, to go into deeper areas of healing. And, of course, that's not something you necessarily have to leave religious life to do. But that was what he was asking me, to trust him and to follow him outside of religious life. And so I left for about 4 years. And during that time, during temporary profession, they're not final vows. So our vows are what they call, they expire. So we take vows for a year, and at the end of that year, we can either renew our vows or then we can leave. So I left, and it was right during 2020. So great time to, go back out into the world. I guess. Yeah. So, but during that time outside of religious life, I am so grateful to the Lord, because that was one of my what ifs. What if, when I first entered, what if religious life isn't the right decision or right choice? And the Lord brought me into such a deeper relationship with him, because it was through that suffering of, the confusion of leaving, the confusion of, really the culture shock of leaving religious life. That was something that I never had even considered. If you have a different name, you have, we wear the habit. So then to go to being called by my baptismal name. And
right.
So it was
Wow.
really, the Lord brought me on that journey of just trusting in him. And the people that he brought on my path, and the friendships I made, and even just my own relationship with the Lord changed in such a, when you go through a suffering, like, as I think Faustina even writes in her day, like, through suffering, love becomes crystallized. And so it really, like, put my faith and trust in God to the test. But that's what really, I only had him to lean on. It was like that, Lord, again, like going into that church and just crying out and saying, Lord, like, do you have me? Do you have my back? Do you have control of the situation? Because I don't. And during that time, that's when he really started to bring me deeper into how he created my heart to love. And that's why I mentioned before that in our discernment of religious life, it has to be about Jesus. It can't be the community. It can't be the habit. The Lord can use that, of course. Like, he can use, like, oh, I really love this habit, I'm going to discern with these. Like,
this is my color.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, gray is not my color, but here we are. We're usually in black. But, the Lord can use that. But what I was realizing during my time away from religious life, and, I'm sure if I had stayed in, he would have found a way to bring me to this realization. But my religious life wasn't founded on him. Of course, in formation, I had read the theology. I had read, all of the beautiful writings that there are on religious life, but it hadn't, like, gone from here to here. And it couldn't get to here because of different wounds that I had. And so the Lord, he invited me to step out. And it was during that time, like, it was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly painful. And I thank God for the community he surrounded me with, because women, like, especially if some of your listeners have friends, it's becoming more. One thing I realized is after I left, like, I started realizing how many women there are out there in our churches who have left religious life, who then don't have that community to surround them with support. So if you have a friend, or if if any of your listeners have a friend or someone who has left religious life, like, just be there for them and just remind them, like, Jesus still loves you. It wasn't, he didn't reject you. He didn't, you weren't too broken for him, because these are a lot of the lies that the enemy can use. But I thank God that he really gave me a community of women who supported me and allowed me to then encounter the Lord in that deeper way. And I started to be able to have the knowledge of the beauty of religious life, and, the knowledge I had of this is where he's calling me to really reach my heart, and to then be able to respond to that love in a reciprocal way, in a completely new and deeper way. So while I was out of religious life, I, again, I was open, because I thought, okay, Lord, like, wherever you're calling me. So I dated some really incredible Catholic men, but it was during that time, it was, again, just the Lord was like, your heart is mine, your heart is mine. And so I reached out to my community, because I knew the charism of redemptive mercy, like, this was it. If it was religious life, this was the order. And so I reached back out to them. And so I came on a rediscernment. And last year in August, I re-entered, and I just reprofessed my vows this March of 2025. And it's even beautiful when I look at, all the ways kind of that Jesus, like, will wink at us. But during, just to retake my vows during a Jubilee year. And this year's, as a congregation, we're celebrating 100 years since Faustina entered our order.
Really?
So I feel like, Faustina, she's my sister saint. Like, she's like journeying with me back. And I'm so grateful just for this 11-year journey now of discerning in religious life, and journeying alongside our Lord to truly just come to know, like, just the beauty of being a bride of Christ. And that was one of the things when I left religious life, that was the hardest for me, was when I would go to pray. Like, I wanted to pray, like, Lord, like, as his spouse. And not having that, it was like just this ache and just this hole in my heart. And so taking my vows in March and just being united with Jesus in that way again, there's no words to explain just the beauty and just the sacredness of that. So I'm so grateful to the Lord. I mean, it's not a journey that I would have ever envisioned, starting out, but again, it was, he took my what if and he said, okay, like it will be a what if, but then it will be that journey towards deeper union and deeper knowledge of what his heart is like, and in ways that I wouldn't have encountered him otherwise.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine it's almost like a breakup in a lot of ways,
yes,
right? Like
yeah.
leaving the religious life, but it must be strange because you're not breaking up with a person. It's like it does feel a little bit like breaking up with God, and in a sense, it's not, because obviously you're still Catholic, you're still having the faith, but that's really an interesting situation to be in, where all of a sudden now it's like the way that you're praying has to change, the way that you were living has to change, and then you're left with, now instead of what ifs of this my vocation, it's like, what now?
And like the person that you would normally lean on, like God, like suddenly you're like, wait, like
this has to look different than it was.
So it's really and this really opened my eyes, and I was speaking with different women while I was out who also had left religious life, and they are now like happily married, they have families, so it was like clear that was the vocation God had for them. But we were all just saying, like, there has to be, so if anyone's listening who this is their experience and they feel called to this, to pray about, I think this is really a gap in the ministry of the church, to support women, and I'm sure also men who leave seminaries go through a similar. I think it's obviously very different because it's, it's just different for many different ways. Men process things differently, and it's a different stage. Like they're not in vows or anything yet, but of just like praying about like how can we really support women who have left, so that like if the Lord is still calling them. Like he was in my case, like to be able to have the trust and the support needed to be able to respond with that yes again, that fiat. So it's I think it's I am so grateful to God for that experience, of just seeing, like what women go through spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, when they do step out of religious life. Because it's it's an adventure, but the Lord is faithful through it all. He's faithful, he's good, he's so just to continue going to him. And this experience was really like what I was sharing before. This is what really somehow opened my eyes to, oh, this is Bride of Christ.
Yeah. So what was it like coming back?
It was such a it was really an experience, because I had, of course, like I had set up, like I had a great job, I had a great community, I had I was joking because I ended up working at a tax firm. So I was joking, it's like St. Matthew, Jesus had to call the tax collector after all that. And but journeying back, it was so beautiful, because all of those questions that I had to Jesus of, do you still love my heart? Do you still see me as your spouse? Am I too broken to serve you? Because our different wounds can tell us many different things, many different lies that the enemy will use. And I remember one day I was in adoration, and I was praying about whether or not to reach back out to the sisters, so I was kind of like toying. I was like, I don't know if this is, if this is from the Lord, or if this is, just because this is what had been familiar. So my spiritual director at the time had encouraged me to write a list. And so I wrote a list of all the reasons why I didn't think that I should go back to religious life, like, and why I didn't think Jesus was calling me. And so I wrote out my list, and I was sitting there, and it came like so clearly in my mind. The Lord was like, you think that these are all of the things that are keeping us apart, but these are the things that actually will bring us closest together if you allow me to reach you there.
Wow.
As your spouse. And so that for me just like changed everything. So I went to my spiritual director. I'm like, is this crazy? You know, like, can the Lord really like, and he's like, what was your charism? And I was like, redemptive mercy. He's like, exactly. You know, it was kind of like one of those moments where it's just like,
oh, right. Yeah.
And so, yeah, like it was such a beautiful experience too, because the Lord, not only did he bring me deeper in the identity of being a bride of Christ, but he also brought me deeper into our specific charism. Our charism is redemptive mercy, which was the mercy that was born on the cross, so the salvation of souls. And Jesus had asked Faustina, you know, help me, my daughter, to save souls. So we took that as we consider her our spiritual co-foundress. And so we take that call as our own, like helping our Lord save souls. And so I really think like just in the Lord's providence, and you know, he knew why it had to be this way, but that experience of leaving and experiencing my own brokenness and my own poverty, that, and then seeing his mercy towards that and his love of my poverty in a way, because that's what would bring me to him. Mm-hmm. That was just such an experience that I needed now for, you know, for my own ministry and my own union with the Lord of Lord. How do you want me to help you save souls? And so having that understanding and compassion of what some people experience and go through in life, and being able to bring God's mercy to them and be that, you know, that channel for our Lord's mercy to reach them, has just been such a gift of the Lord's mercy in so many different ways for myself. And also I've already seen how the Lord is using all of, you know, like I was even just thinking today, like the Lord is blessing us with his wounds. And so it's like also like for me as his bride to be like, okay, Lord, if I unite my wounds to yours and my life, my whole life to you, then he can use me to then, you know, to bless others in different ways. So yeah, it's absolutely incredibly beautiful. And our congregation, we have really the beautiful privilege really of being God's channels for the world. So here in the States, we do a lot of spiritual direction. We go to a lot of like conferences, congresses on divine mercy. We have a retreat house so we can lead retreats. We have our ministry here at the John Paul II National Shrine. So we're meeting with pilgrims and schools, and, you know, being able to speak and remind people of God's love and mercy for them. And so, yeah, it's been just an incredible blessing to see what the Lord is doing in my own life. And then through that, you know, and so in many ways, I'm just at the beginning again of my religious journey, but I'm so excited to see what the Lord, you know, has in store.
Well, I'm so glad for your story, and so glad for God leading you to where you're meant to be. And I can just, even though it's early, and I can see how so much of your life experience is probably really going to help other people in your ministry going forward. We're always so grateful to God for those life experiences, as hard as they are, because they really do, like, you'll face those things and look back on it, and I would say most of the time you'll be able to say, I would go through that again for you, God, because I can see how that helped me now. I'm sure that will be the case for you as well. So thank you, sister,
thank you so
for
much.
coming on
thank
and
you,
sharing.
It's
been wonderful.
Yeah, and thank you for all of the ministry that you're doing as well. You know, you're also
you.
proclaiming the Lord's mercy. So
yes, in different ways.
Yes,
That's the beauty of it all.